911, what's your emergency?
The following content is graphic, emotional, and includes dark humor that may not be suitable for all listeners. Discretion is advised, explicit content included. These stories are based on real-life EMS and first responder experiences. The calls are real, the providers are real. Names and patient details have been changed to protect privacy. Episodes may include trauma, suicide, abuse, medical emergencies, mental health struggles, or things your HR department would definitely not approve of. Any advice, opinions, or discussion of medical procedures are based on personal experience and should never override your local protocols, medical direction, or training. Use your damn brain. Follow your guidelines and your local or agency protocols. Follow your training. And when in doubt, call Med Control. Most importantly, if you're struggling, don't do it alone. Talk to someone, a coworker, a friend, a therapist. Or hell, reach out to me. I'll answer. Need help right now? Text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org.
All right, you're listening to Dispatched Dysfunctional, where chaos has a pulse, leadership gets tested, and we find out what happens when the uniform becomes your identity. Today's guest has spent his life helping people understand what it really means to lead, not through rank, but through responsibility. Pat Welsh is a veteran, author, speaker, and leadership consultant. He's built his career around one powerful philosophy: the warrior, servant, leader mindset. It's about leading with courage, serving with humility, and finding the strength to stay human even in high-stress, high-stakes environments. Pat, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. It's great to be here, and I love the title, especially the dysfunctional part.
Oh, it matches perfectly. So I gave folks a quick version of what you do, but nobody tells your story like you can. For listeners meeting you for the first time, who is Pat Welsh, and what do you want people to take away from this conversation?
Two things. One, I did everything but backwards. I was actually a DA, assistant DA, who became a cop and then spent the next 26 years sworn working with Dayton, Ohio Police Department. Worked my way up the ranks and retired as a major over West Patrol operations. And what I want people to walk away from is this mindset of being a warrior, a servant, and a leader in all aspects of your life, not just as a cop. And that means always striving to do the right thing at the right time, the right way, and for the right reasons. So that's it in a Reader's Digest version.
I love it. That is very interesting. He went from DA to cop. That's unheard of.
Yeah, completely, but backwards.
I mean,
but
didn't you make a lot more money as a DA?
That's what everybody says that to me, and so I was a prosecutor from 1982 to 1986, and when I left the DA's office, I was making $22,000 a year. The starting pay, and I didn't do this for the money. I did it because it was my calling and passion.
Right.
But the fun. Not funny, but ironic thing is the starting pay with the GED, not even a high school diploma, on the Dayton Police Department was $26,000 a year, plus overtime, plus benefits. So yeah, my first year as a cop, I think I broke $35,000, and I just left a job where the most I could make was 22. There was no overtime, there was no benefits or anything to really speak of. So,
wow.
So that's a myth that, lawyers are making bank. Nah. When I was I had a private practice on the side.
Right.
And I still did as even as a cop. All I did was civil kind of stuff. But back in 1986, having your own practice was 51% overhead. So 51 cents of every dollar you actually collected, not just build was going right out the door for expenses. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
now I see why lawyers charge so much now. So I'm sure that all went up in the end as well. So
Yep.
So picture a lieutenant in the field, a medic on their fifth back-to-back call, or a sergeant trying to hold their team together after a fatal wreck. They all look composed from the outside, calm, capable, solid, but inside the armor's cracking. Pat calls that the invincible collapse, the moment when leaders realize they're supposed to be unshakable even when they're breaking. And that's where this conversation starts. Pat, let's start at the beginning. You said your story began with abandonment and adoption, and that it built your foundation for faith. How did that shape you, the man you became?
Yeah. Great question. Yeah, I'm a naturalized citizen. I was born in Dublin, Ireland, back in the 1950s. My birth mother was a 39-year-old widow when I was born, and when I was 3 days old, she put me in an orphanage, and I lived there till I was 16 months old, and then was adopted through Catholic Charities in an order of nuns to the United States. And so I always grew up, and I was the only kid in the whole neighborhood. When I was 5.5 years old, I had to go to federal court and raise my little right hand and become a U.S. citizen.
Wow.
And so always growing up, particularly anybody that's adopted, you have two main questions, and that is, why didn't my quote unquote real mom keep me, and what's my medical history? Because you go through your whole life, as a kid and even as an adult, and you go to the doctor and they go, okay, well, is there a history of this, and this? And I go, skip all those questions. I have no idea. I'm adopted.
Wow, that's got to be hard.
Yeah, and it plays, and I had an American-born sister that they adopted when she was 3 days old. So that's all she really knew as her family. But and we approached it kind of differently. She really resented being put up for adoption. I didn't know where Ireland was even at on a map, and probably until like third grade or something. And so I didn't struggle a whole lot with, I shouldn't say struggle. I struggled with it, but I didn't dwell on the fact that I was, literally abandoned. I found out later. Let me tell you the rest of the Paul Harvey, the real quick rest of the story.
Yes,
40 years later, I actually met my birth mother in person in Ireland, and my mom and dad, my wife, my American-born sister, and her husband. We all got to meet and spend 3 days with my birth mother. So there was a lot of closure and healing that happened both for her and for me as a result of that. But I did grow up with the kind of that mindset of I'm on my own. My birth mother, or a lot of people will say adopted. They'll play, oh, my real mom wouldn't make me eat peas or broccoli, or it's a fallback defense of resistance.
right.
And anger, and and you're a kid. But when I got older and started and we had 5 kids of our own, so I navigated it through it, but it wasn't always an easy ride.
That sounds like a very tough life in the end. I mean, I couldn't imagine being adopted. I don't know. And I know that has to take some kind of, mental anguish on yourself, even as a child, trying to figure it out. Like you said, a lot of the kids ask, why did my birth mom give me up? Why am I not with them? And I'm sure that's got to cause some kind of mental anguish, just even as a kid, and probably to this day. I'm not sure, but
yeah, well, because I actually got to meet her and spend time with her, and got to ask all the questions I wanted to ask. And she didn't, hold back or anything like that. So I got that closure. The fascinating part of that is that the kids that are adopted focus on me. Why did my mom do this, this, and this. We have no clue how adversely affected giving a child up for adoption is to the birth mother. And so I learned her story and how for 40 years, by the way, I have a biological sister in Ireland as well. And it was my sister in Ireland that told me, until Mommy met you, every year from middle of November through the middle of January, Mommy would get depressed and sick.
Oh,
And she goes, I never knew why, because my sister didn't know about me.
right.
And well, my birthday's in November, and her birthday's in the middle of January.
Gotcha.
And so for 40 years, that she suffered those consequences of guilt or depression and whatnot for not keeping me. That after we met, and my sister told us she lived for another 4 years. She died. She was 84 years old.
Sorry.
And she, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry to hear that.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. But my sister in Ireland told me for the next 4 years after we met in person, she never got depressed or sick again. So I really encourage that there are listeners out there who are adopted. Don't carry that burden and the past, because it'll just eat you up, especially if you never get the chance to meet your biological parents or mother and get answers to the questions that you have.
Wow. That's very heartfelt and awesome in the end.
Thank you.
So you spent 30 years in law enforcement, and yet your message centers on compassion and service. What taught you that being a warrior doesn't mean shutting off your heart?
A couple of encounters, and both professionally and personally, in a personal life. Professionally, the one that struck me the most, because I had I don't know, I had a little bit of an attitude as a cop, and I had that us versus them mindset after I was on the job for a few years. But one of the things that a call that really brought this home to me, there's two in particular. One involved a 12-year-old, and it was a return missing. His parents had reported him missing. He didn't come home from school on Friday afternoon. And so a crew working days, or 3 to 11 shift, caught the initial missing runaway call. And I worked midnights for 13 of my 26 years.
Wow.
So I was a midnight officer on this particular call. And it was about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning where I got dispatched. It was on my beat to this return missing. And it was a 12-year-old African-American kid in a 99.9% black neighborhood that was infested with drugs and gangs and all that kind of stuff. And when I pulled up, I was kind of shocked. There was grass in the front yard, and it was cut, and the bushes were trimmed. So it was like an oasis in the desert. So I go up and knock on the door, and both mom and dad answered the door, which was another shock because most of the folks living in my beat were single parent, mother run households.
Right.
So they invited me in. The house was impeccable, and they explained to me that we're not on welfare. We both work. We have our son in private school, and we're paying tuition, which is why we can't afford to move out of this neighborhood. And we're at our wits' end because he's running with the wrong crowd of kids, of boys in the neighborhood. And I'm thinking, hey, look, all I got to do is he's home. Is he hurt? And if he does this again, just call us and we'll take a report.
Right.
So I want to get out of there. It's Friday night. The bars are going to be closing in a half an hour. and I want to go headhunting and do real police work.
Right.
And so I gave my little spiel. I'm thinking this is going to take 2 minutes. And Mom looks at me and she goes, "We don't know what to do. Will you talk to him?" So I said, what's going through my mind is I was a 30-some-odd-year-old cop, white guy. What am I going to tell a 12-year-old black kid living in this hellhole that's going to make a difference? So I looked at Mom and I said, "Sure, absolutely, I'll talk to him. But, can I just talk to him, just he and me?"
Right.
And they go, "Yeah." And they had this little parlor sitting room. They took me in there, and I went in. They brought their son in. I don't even remember his name. And he sat down. He never made eye contact with me. He sat in a chair, and he dropped his head. And I talked to him not like a cop, but like a parent, because we had kids of our own. And probably didn't say anything that his parents hadn't already said to him in the first place.
Right, of course.
And I wasn't with him, I bet, 5 minutes. And then I left. 18 years later, I'm standing in line at Kroger's, having done the grocery shopping. I'm off duty. I carried my gun everywhere with me on a Uncle Mike's ankle holster because we had to live in the city, and the city was we were the 7th most violent city per capita in the United States.
Oh, fun.
So I carried a gun with me everywhere, and I'm standing in line, and I'm just minding my own business. I want the clerk to, ring everything up, get it back, and get out of here. And this voice to my left goes, "Hey, Welsh, is that you?" And I turn. There's a little old lady next to me, and I turn and look, and this dude's about 6'4", black male, looked to be probably in his 30s, and I'm like, "Holy crap! What did I arrest him for?" And I go from a green to flashing red lights.
Right.
What am I going to do if he gets froggy with this little old lady? I don't have a radio. This is before cell phones. And if he follows me out to the parking lot, I'm just rapidly thinking. One of my thoughts is, dagnabbit, if I was here in the evening, there'd be an off-duty Dayton cop working security. At least I'd have backup, and he's got a radio. So I don't have any of that. And so I pulled a General Mattis, be polite, be professional, have a plan to kill this guy. So I turned to him, and I'm professional, polite. I go, yes, it is. He goes, "You probably don't remember me." And I said, "No, sir, I don't." He goes, "When I was 12 years old, you came to my house because I didn't come home from school. I just want to tell you that I graduated from college, I'm married, and I have 2 kids, and want to say thank you." And so that, I'm like, who's the asshole now? Wow. Pardon my language. No, but that's what I'm thinking. And that had such an impact on me that my default reaction to people is, you must be a bad guy. And that really hit me hard, that I'm treating people like everybody's a suspect. And then I got to thinking, man, am I treating my kids the same way and their friends, that I'm always expecting the worst? Because, nobody calls the police to stop by and have a cup of coffee because they're having a great day.
Right. We're out there on the worst day of their lives. Yeah.
And so that hit me really, really hard, from this message of a mindset of particularly that servant and leader part of it. We all have the warrior part down. And my definition of a warrior is somebody that stands up, shows up, and defends what they believe. And so as cops, we stand up and show up and defend, the least, the last, the lost, the victims. Half the time we're a social worker, kind of environment. And that's what we're called to stand up. And those are the people we're called to defend that can't defend themselves. So we're really good at that. We're really weak at that servant mindset of putting the wants and needs of others before your own. And we get this contempt of cop. It's us versus them, because we were all taught, I'm going to ask you to do something. I'm going to tell you to do it if you don't. And if you still don't do it, I'm going to make you do it. And that's not a servant mindset. And there are times we have to take care of business, and I'm all for that. I've been treated in the hospital for injuries, and fortunately, I was never in an officer-involved shooting. Close a couple times on pulling the trigger, and I'm absolutely take care of business when it's time to take care of business. But the flip side of that is we also have to have this mindset of putting the wants and needs of others before our own, and help solve their problems. And I think like Mother Teresa, St. Teresa now of Calcutta, great example of that servant aspect. And then that leadership part of being a person of impact and influence. You can really impact and influence somebody's life, and it results in going toe to toe in a fight,
right?
Because you pissed them off or whatever. I always tell people, Hitler was a great leader for all the wrong reasons. He was a person of influence and impact for all the wrong reasons. So there's such a thing as bad leaders. But the flip side is, on a positive note, how are you influencing and impacting other people's lives? So that 12-year-old was a huge one. And then there was one other one that, I will always remember this. Just like you'll always remember your first homicide that you went on, or, fatal accident. You'll know. I've been on over 300 homicides. I can tell you vividly my first one was a murder-suicide, but that's not what I want to talk about.
Right.
But what I want to talk about is I get a call from my sergeant, who used to be my partner when we were both patrolmen, to respond to this house. And I get there, and there's an ambulance and his cruiser, and then there was a two-man crew. Their cruiser was there. And I walk in, and again, it's predominantly 99% African-American part of town. And there's 4 or 5 adults in there. In this little living room is a bungalow, maybe 900 square feet. It was small.
Wow.
And it was real plaster, not drywall, but plaster with the little wood lats and behind it. And when I walked in the front door, on the floor is part of the plaster of the wall is on the floor in a pile. And on the other side of the wall, I hear this banging. It was real rhythmic, like a bang against the wall, and then a voice goes, "Oh God," and then bang, "Oh God," bang, "Oh God." And there's these 4 or 5 adults there. My sergeant, who's African American, standing there with his arms crossed, and he's near a doorway that goes to this room where this banging is coming from. And then there's these 2 cops, and they were big boys, and I could really take care of business. And so I walk over to the sergeant, and I can't see into the room yet. And so I go, "Sergeant, what can I do?" He goes, "We've been here 45 minutes, and we can't get this guy to voluntarily go to the hospital." We called it a pink slip, a 3-day evaluation for mental health.
Right, just a mental eval, pretty much.
Yeah. And we called it a pink slip because it was literally you filled out a pink piece of paper at the hospital. And he goes, "We got to pink slip this guy, and we can't get him to go voluntarily." I said, "So, what do you want me to do?" He goes, "Well, you're the smallest guy on duty tonight. And it's a little room. It's a small bedroom. Just go in, dive on top of him, see if you can hold him down. And then the other 2 officers are going to come in and try and get him handcuffed and get him out." I go, "What's the ambulance for?" He goes, "Well, either you or him, because somebody's going to get hurt." And so I looked at him, and he was serious. I looked at him. I go, "Okay, can I talk to him for a minute?" And he goes, "Yeah, knock yourself out. We've been here 45 minutes. So that's when yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm just thinking, and this is before pepper gas and tasers. So I knew the flashlights and the nightsticks were going to be, swinging. and I was going to be between, the guy on the ground and the two officers swinging flashlights. So I turned to go into the room, and I stop, and I'm like, oh my God, this is mini Mike Tyson. The guy looked like Mike Tyson, a younger version of Mike Tyson. No shoes, no shirt, no socks on, sweating, his head shaved, bald, sweating like a prostitute in church on Sunday. And I'm like, holy crap. And he's sitting on the floor, and he's just between the end of the bed and the wall is enough room for him. And he has his legs kind of, not up to his chest, but his legs are up. And he's rocking and hitting this wall, and he keeps saying, oh God, every time. And he's real catatonic, like he's looking straight ahead at the bed.
Oh, shit.
So I kind of measure, his arm length and then, stay about a foot beyond that. And I squat down and I go, hi, my name's Pat. What's your name? And bang, oh God, he won't look at me. And so I tried, a couple more times, and I just could not get him to look at me and pay attention. So I got up and I went out and I asked, hey, who's his mama? And this older woman says, I am. I said, is your son a religious kind of person? And she goes, well, my husband, who just died a couple of months ago, was the pastor at our small church, and he and my son were very, very close. And my son is separated from his wife, and he's working a couple of jobs. And tonight, this happened. I don't know what's going on. And I said, okay. So I go back in. I squat down, and I figure I got one shot to get this guy's attention. Otherwise, somebody's going to the hospital in an ambulance. So I squat down, and I just said this to him. I go, who do you pray with? And he stopped rocking, and he turned his head, and he looked at me. So now I can see his eyes, and I'm like, oh, good, his pupils aren't dilated, or, he looks normal. He's not on anything. And he goes, nobody. And I said, okay, is there somewhere in the Bible where it says something about if two or more people are together, God's there with them? And he goes, yes. Actually, he said, yes, sir. So now I'm like, dude's polite and not high. So this is looking a little bit better.
Right.
So I said to him, I go, look, if I agree to pray with you, will you agree to stand up, get dressed, and let me take you to the hospital to talk to somebody about what's going on with you tonight? And he goes, yes, sir. I said, then get dressed. And he stood up, he got dressed. I had no handcuffs. I walked him out to the cruiser, put him in the back seat behind the cage. It's like, you ain't riding up front, brother. Because if you go, psycho on me, at least you'll be in the back seat behind the cage. But I didn't handcuff him. And then before I started the cruiser to take him to the hospital, I said, hey, I'm Catholic. We're not big on long prayers and stuff. So I said, I'd like to say a short prayer for you. And I did. And then I drove him to the hospital. And I filled out the pink slip, took him to the emergency room. They put him back in a room. And the next evening, I went back to the hospital, and the same ER doc was on. And I go, hey, what happened to the guy I brought in last night? He goes, he had 102 fever, and he has pneumonia.
Oh, shit.
And that's why he just had snapped with all that was going on in his life. It wasn't a mental health issue. He had just hit his threshold of challenges, and it was all aggravated by the having pneumonia and a fever.
Right.
So that incident also really struck me as from the power of prayer and the mindset of I want to help you, not hurt you, kind of deal.
Right.
And so those were two dispatches that really impacted me in a positive way. I had plenty other ones that were not so positive outcomes.
Of course.
But that's and then when you throw in the personal life, my wife was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 2004, and I didn't retire till 2012, and we had 5 kids, 3 daughters. How do you share that news? So there's still a lot of obstacles and challenges that we all face every day, even when you're trying to lead a very positive, faith-filled life. I mean, just ask all the apostles.
And it's amazing that you've kept your faith during all of that. That's tremendous. And it's one thing that I've noticed as well as a medic on the truck is there are certain patients that are extremely religious, and once you get them talking about religion, you figure out, if they're Baptist, Catholic, or, whatever, and you just get them talking, it usually seems to settle them down. And to me, that's the compassion that we need to have. That's the empathy we need to have with our people, even as a police officer or a medic or a firefighter. Like you said earlier, we're service people. We need to see them as people and not just as another run. And that's the biggest thing to me.
Yeah. Well, and I did a podcast on this earlier this year. There's a fine line between compassion and empathy. And I am a firm believer that if you engage in empathy unchecked, you're going to burn out, and you are going to get frustrated, and you're going to want to quit, because in empathy is you are taking on that person's suffering or whatever they're going through, and compared to compassion, it's empathy. You can dive down a really deep rabbit hole.
Very true.
Because you're so empathetic and so sensitive to their suffering that you want to take that suffering on yourself and away from them. And in our professions, first responders and medics and even in the military and social services, a lot you see this as well, is if you let your empathy go unchecked, you're going to have some serious issues. And I'm more of an advocate of, I can have a empathetic initial response, but then I'm going to switch to compassion, because the root of the word compassion is passion, and passion in Latin means suffering. And compassion is seeing the suffering of someone else and then doing something about it, not by taking it onto yourself, because there's what's that famous saying? If you want it done right, do it yourself.
Right.
The worst advice you could ever give anybody is, but compassion is you have one foot in there in that suffering, but the other foot is firmly planted and strategically assessing, how can I help this person? Is it, what resources can I get them? And it may be something as simple as, can I pray for you? And if they say yes, then you're helping them walk through their problem, and not you putting it on your shoulders and trying to carry it away from them. And that took me a long time to learn that, because as cops, man, it doesn't take us but 3 to 5 years that we start hating everybody,
Right.
except other cops. You turn around, you're on the job for 5 years, and then you're like, oh man, the only friends I have are cops. I don't I don't do anything with the guys I went to high school with, or I don't reach out to anybody I went to college with, or if somebody retires or lateral entries or whatever, and you're not one of us anymore, and you don't reach out and check up on them, or just go, hey, let's go grab a beer. And we get so engrossed with the self-defense mechanisms, which I think we need to have. I mean, you and I see and do things that no human being should ever have to deal with. And it's a natural response to create some sort of self-protection defense. Our problem is we don't pick healthy ones.
That's true.
We pick alcohol. We, pick, on our third or fourth wife, kind of deal. All sorts of things that are, I can understand them, but they're not healthy choices. And then you end up with PTSD and other stuff.
Right. And on that note, actually here, I have another question I got for you. So you said ego kills teams faster than failure. How does humility actually strengthen leadership instead of weakening it? Because that actually falls back into what we just talked about.
Yeah, a great book. It's by Ryan Holiday called "Ego is the Enemy," and that's where I first started looking into this whole concept of the self-centered ego. We all have egos, but we don't all have healthy egos, and that self-centered ego that this is about, what's in it for me is will kill relationships, will eat you alive, as opposed to genuine, authentic humility, which is not being a doormat for somebody else, but that you have that other-centered mindset of a servant. Servants, being a servant has a lot of negative connotations to it, I think, to some people. Is a servant supposed to do what I tell him to do, when I tell him to do it, how I tell him to do it, and they're there to take care of me. That's not what a real servant, that's a slave.
Right.
A real servant is a person that sees your wants and needs and puts that ahead of their own wants and needs. And for cops, like you kind of laugh when I said earlier that I spent 13 years on midnights, is it wasn't until long after I retired, and my wife and I, we've been married 45 years.
Well, congratulations. That's a long time.
Yeah.
I've only made it 20, so.
She's a saint. But after I retired, she actually confided in me that, for most of your career, I felt like a single parent raising 5 kids because I was on midnights, and that was part of it. So I was sleeping during the daytime, and that was part of it. But she goes, what made it worse is because I worked narcotics.
Oh, wow.
As a detective, and then I was the commander of the unit, Vice Narcotics Intelligence, for 3 years. She goes, we'd go on vacations, and by now, cell phones were a thing. She goes, we'd go on vacations to Hilton Head, South Carolina, and be on the beach. And she goes, you'd be on the phone talking to informants instead of, playing and spending time with the kids and the family. And so I'm like, I had to own that what I thought was, I'm being a warrior, I'm being a servant, I'm being a leader because I'm solving crimes and I'm doing this and that and the other thing. In reality, it was at the expense of my family. And so from when I say humility, I genuinely mean that you have to have that servant mindset, not just about work, but about every aspect of your life. And that requires humility, because it's very, very ego crushing to go, hey, I'm going to put somebody else's wants and needs before my own, or I'm going to give somebody else credit when I really did the work, but they're claiming the credit, and you don't get butthurt about that and go, okay, whatever. Good for you. Congratulations.
Right.
A friend of mine says, Chris Stefanik says this. He goes, hey, this is a sign of genuine humility. When that guy that you don't know cuts you off on the highway, give him a 5-finger wave, not a 1-finger wave. He goes, that takes a lot of humility to wave and say thank you, or wave and say, hey, I'm sorry, even though they don't see or hear it, that it's not about you. They're having a bad day. I don't, whatever. Don't just knee jerk and go, oh, they did that because of whatever. And oh, I'm driving a nice car and they're not. That's your ego. And that's hard for cops because we're given that authority to take away somebody's freedom and to use deadly force when it's necessary and legal. And that takes a lot of ego in a way to be able to do that and not do it out of resentment.
Right, or spite, really.
Yeah. That whole contempt of cop, oh, okay, well, you're being a jackass, you're going to jail for disorderly conduct.
Right.
It's like, as opposed to, hey, can you tell me, what's going on in your life? Why are you so mad at me and yelling at me? How can I help you? What do you need? What do you want? Instead, we go to this automatic, okay, you're a jerk, and I'm going to show you who's boss.
Yeah, like you said earlier, the humility and the egos, we need to keep those in checks in our jobs. And also, we are servants, as you said, and we need to properly serve our communities instead of beat ourselves up or cause more harm to our patrons. It causes this shift that we have right now, in my opinion, of everyone, hating first responders or cops or whatever. You know what I mean? It's the one bad person outweighs the thousands of good.
Yeah. And I think it really comes a couple of basic things. And again, it's taken me years to get to a lot of these aha moments, if you will. But we need to be, both personally and professionally, develop our listening skills, be better listeners, because so often what cops are listening for and how they listen is not to learn what's going on in somebody's life or what problem they're having that you might be able to help solve. But we listen with the intent to respond. But we already have an answer. We're already ahead of the conversation. It doesn't matter what they say, because I'm going to ask you, I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to make you. And that's how we listen. We're listening for compliance. And when in reality, we should be listening to learn. It's like when you have kids. I have 3 daughters. It took me a long time to learn that when one of the daughters is complaining to me, they're not complaining because they want me to solve their problem. They're complaining because they just want dad to listen and tell them everything's going to be okay.
Right.
And so we need to be better listeners. And I think, man, a great book. I'm in the middle of it. Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference. And I'm like, hostage negotiators are the best listeners in the world. And then if you're really, really good, you're listening for not to make them comply to something, but to try and go through what is it that they want and what is it that they need, and how can I accomplish serving both of them or getting them off that button, off that X mark of this is what I want. Well, I can't give you what you want. But what do you really need? And they do that question. They ask more questions than they give commands. And I think that would serve us as officers across the board, is to be better listeners and not always jump to always wanting to be the law enforcer.
Right. And I think, honestly, that brings me to a question I have as well. Is I think that's more of a culture thing, and you do talk a lot about culture, and not just agency culture, but personal culture. How do you
Hmm.
define it, and what does culture actually mean inside a department or a team?
Okay, great question, because most people, when they hear the word culture, they automatically jump to race,
That is not
and
true.
and that is not culture. So let me give you, I'll give you the definition of culture, and then I'll real quickly tell you the progression of how you get to that.
Okay.
So this is my definition of culture, and this is based on years of study and all that kind of stuff and experience. Culture is the expected and accepted way of thinking, talking, and acting within a group. And that becomes the group culture, whether it's at work, in your family has a culture. Your kids know what is expected and accepted way of thinking, talking, and acting in your family. Then that's your family culture. I was raised in the 50s and 60s. Children are to be seen and not heard. Well, that is a sign of a culture. That was what was expected and accepted. If you were out in public and you showed your ass, at the grocery store or whatever,
Yes,
or
yes.
you're at a family picnic and you're interrupting conversations your parents are having with other relatives or whatever, you're going to hear about it later because you violated the culture, the rules, what was expected and accepted. So the question is, how do you arrive at a culture so that that will also teach you how to change a culture? So here's the progression, and it's linear. It's not circular. Everything begins with a thought. Everything you hear in stereo, you hear in stereo, you remember in video, but you think in questions. So everything begins with the thought, and your thinking becomes attitudes because you have a settled way of thinking. And in law enforcement, that settled way of thinking can be it's us versus them. I'm going to ask you. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to make you. That's how you think. That becomes your attitude, and your attitude is displayed in behaviors. If you have kids and you say to your kid, or when you were growing up, your dad or your mom said to you, "I don't like your attitude." What they're saying is, I don't like the way you're behaving because your behavior gives me insight to what you're thinking. So everything begins with the thought. Thoughts become attitudes, a settled way of thinking. Attitudes are displayed in behaviors. Repeated behaviors become habits. Habits become your culture. So if you want to change the culture of your family, you want to change the culture of your agency, you want to change the culture in your faith community or in your neighborhood, you don't start with rules and regulations. Sun Tzu in The Art of War says the best chance of success at bringing about change is for the person that you're asking to change internalizes the value of making that change. And so the only way you can do that is affecting how people think. Some of the famous quotes, win the minds and hearts, or hearts and minds, depending on which one goes first. But if I win your heart and mind, I'm going to touch your emotions first, and then I'm going to try and touch your mind so that you'll think differently. And that different way of thinking is going to be displayed in behaviors, and repeated behaviors become the habits. And then that's what becomes accepted and expected.
Huh.
I had it. It's on my challenge coin for my company. I had this laminated. It was outside my door, on the wall outside my door to my office as a sergeant and lieutenant. And then we didn't have captains. And when I made major, superintendent. And this is what I expected and accepted in the way of thinking, talking, and acting with my folks. And it was just 4 things. Always strive to do the right thing at the right time, the right way, and for the right reasons. So everything you think, do, and say, are you doing it? Are you doing the right thing? Are you doing it the right way? Are you doing it at the right time? And are you doing it for the right reasons? And that's the culture I wanted in the units I commanded or in the districts I commanded. Because if you are doing those four things, then you're going to be good with me and I'm going to back you up. But if it's as simple as this. When I was a lieutenant and I had a sergeant would come to me and go, hey, I got an FTO that tells me they're having problems with their rookie officer. And I know they've come into my office because they want me to do their job for them. They want me to tell them what to do next. And I would sit them down and I'd go, well, Sarge, what do you think is the right thing to do? What do you think is the right way to do it? And I'm working on their mind. What do you think? And then we can come to what are we going to do? And that's culture. And if everybody embraces that, then your morale's not going to suck.
Right.
You're going to have good morale. Your citizen complaints for officers being rude are going to go down. Your abuse of sick leave is going to go down because you've created the culture of, and if your culture is we're a family and family first. Okay, well, in your real life family at home, would you, tell your kids that are getting bad grades, would you simply tell them, hey, get your head out of your ass and do better? No, you're going to dig deeper as to, why are you getting these bad grades? Why are you getting detention at school? And we're just not going to create more rules and regulations because every cop knows how to get around every rule and regulation.
Right.
Yeah, and so why play those games? Why be honest, upfront, authentic, and go, hey, here's what I expect, and I'll accept, and I expect you to hold me accountable to that same standard. Did I ever tell you the story about how I shot a chair in my office?
No, that one sounds interesting. Why? Why or how did this occur? Is my question.
yeah. It's I mean, it was totally boneheaded. We were going to go on vacation down to Hilton Head, and I decided this was a Thursday, and we're going to leave on Saturday. So I thought, hey, you know what? I'm going to. We had a backup gun issued to us, a baby Glock, 9mm, and I never carried it. I always carried my duty full size because I wanted all those extra rounds when I was off duty.
Right, of course.
So, but I thought, hey, you know what? I'm just going to take. I'm going to take my baby Glock and my belly pack on vacation. Well, my gun was locked in a closet, my office closet, and I had this conference table. I had like 10 chairs around it, and I had 2 visitor chairs, at my desk, and then my desk chair. And then I had 2 doors. One went out to the secretary in the public area, and one went out to the sergeants in the roll call and to the locker rooms and employee parking lot area. So I unlock my door, and I reach up on the shelf because the shelf's higher, than me. And I grab the gun, and then I reach up with my left hand, and I get the magazine. And then I'm like, okay, I'm trying to. Where's the ejected round that had been chambered, and it's not up on the shelf. And I just went into total autopilot, and I'm like, man, I can't believe I left a round chambered. So I rack a round out, and I have it in my hand, and and this slide had gone back, and so I got the magazine in my left hand, I got the ejected round in my left hand, I got the gun in my right hand, autopilot, pointed in a safe direction, which was down and towards this chair, and pull the trigger. And I couldn't hear for the next 3 days because I didn't have on ear protection. And there was a round in the gun. And shot a hole through this chair, and it ricocheted off the floor. And I had, cinder block walls and very thin carpet over concrete. And it ricocheted and went underneath my credenza. And a sergeant kind of pokes his head in from that one door. I found out later my secretary just like froze. There was nobody there. Fortunately, there was no civilians out in the public area. And she just sat there froze because everybody thought I'd just, commit suicide. The sergeant pokes his head around. He's like, "Boss, you okay?" I go, "Yeah, accidental discharge." And so he comes in, and so I got to call my boss. So I'm a lieutenant at this time, commander of a district. So I called my boss, my major, and he goes, "Well, call IA." And I go, "Aren't you supposed to do that?" He goes, "I'm not the one that pulled the trigger." So he goes, and we were a 520 person department.
Oh, so
I called. So yeah, so I call internal affairs, and the detective comes out, and I'm going to get a reprimand, which I, richly deserve. And so I go home, that evening. I come back the next morning, and what's going through my mind is, man, how this is so embarrassing. What are my officers going to think about, the lieutenant, shooting a chair in his office, what an idiot, and all these thoughts of, that I've, tarnished my reputation, and I'm thinking about me. And so I come through the roll call room and past some sergeants' offices to get to my door, and which my office is locked. And on the not on the door, but on the wall next to it is this typed message, not handwritten, that says, "If the lieutenant invites you into the office and asks you to take a seat, politely decline and remain standing." And I thought, oh, that's cute, that's funny. And I open the door to my office, and I unlock it and open the door. Every chair in my office has a bullseye target on it.
Oh shit!
And then so I kind of laughed a little bit, and then I go to my desk, and on my desk is a 3x5 card that has typed on it, "Here lie the remains of the chair executed by Lieutenant Welsh on such and such a date." And sitting next to it is this clear, it's like a recipe box that your mom or grandma may have had. It's clear, hard plastic, and it's filled with ashes from somebody's fireplace. And then next to that is a dart gun and 2 darts with a typed 3x5 card that says, "Lieutenant, this might be safer to take with you on vacation." And my first thought is, who the hell has keys to my office? And but then it was a leadership. It was genuinely a leadership lesson for me that I realized, hey, Pat, don't take yourself so seriously. You made a mistake, and your troops aren't holding it against you. They trust you enough. You've built a relationship with them. They can poke the dog and tease you a little bit, knowing you're not going to get pissy pants about it and start demanding who broke into my office and pulled this stunt. And so we all had a good laugh, and I kept those ashes on my credenza for years as a reminder. Yep. Think before you pull the trigger. And we had some fun with it. And I realized that's the culture I built, is that I can hold you accountable for your conduct, but I'm not going to be a jackass about it. And that it's not the end of the world. And if you can find a little humor in doing something boneheaded, that's okay. And I think that's important, because if you have that kind of relationship with your folks, is that when it does come down to the nitty gritty of, hey, this wasn't just a boneheaded mistake. Or I'll tell you, I had an officer, IA came in one day when I was a superintendent, a major over operations. And IA detective came in and gave me paperwork to relieve an officer of duty. take their gun and badge, and it was specs and charges for some stuff that happened off duty and involved alcohol. And so I had to do that. And I came home and I was telling my daughter, one of my daughters was working at an Irish pub at the time. And I was telling her, I said, "Hey, do you know this guy?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "I just had to relieve him of duty because apparently he's like got some alcohol issues and behavior issues." And her first response goes, "Everybody knows that." I go, "What?" And she goes, "Oh, yeah, he's an alcoholic," because he would hang out at this Irish pub.
Oh.
And I'm like, I didn't know it. And then what really disappointed me is, and then talking to some of a couple lieutenants and a sergeant, is, oh, yeah, everybody knew this guy would get shit-faced drunk and do stupid stuff. And I'm like, why didn't anybody step in and go and confront him? We had, employee assistance programs. Why didn't somebody do something positive? This guy's, he lost his job. And a year later, he came into my office, talked to the secretary. He was no longer a cop. He wasn't even living in our county anymore. He moved, and he came in, and I think it was probably part of a 12-step program, but he came in just to tell me, "Hey, boss, I just want to let you know, no animosity, no nothing. You did what you had to do, and I want you to know I've been clean and sober for the last 10 months, and life is good." But it took losing his job to come to that positive outcome of a better life, when every cop that he worked with and worked for knew that he was an alcoholic and needed help and did nothing. And that's very disappointing, because it's like that Kermit the Frog meme, drinking a cup of tea with the little thing that says "none of my business."
Right.
Well, yes, it is. It is your business. If you're genuinely, the thin blue line and the red line of firefighters and medics, if you really believe that, then don't turn, because here's what happens. If you turn a blind eye to a problem, you'll eventually be blind in both eyes. And it was just so, it disappointed me greatly that people knew this about this officer and turned a blind eye to it. And that's not the kind of culture that you want,
right,
in your agency or even in your family life.
That's turning your back on your coworkers, on your family, on pretty much anything. And that actually brings me to my next question, in all honesty, is, if someone listening right now feels like they're failing as a leader because they're tired or just worn out or burned out, what would you say to them?
A couple of things. One would be first thing would be a question. Who are your 5 closest friends and why? And that's going to be your inner circle of people you need to, if you're burned out, if you're depressed, you just want to quit or retire on duty, who are your 5 closest friends, and tell me why they're your closest friends. And then depending on what that response is going to be, if they go, "Well, I don't even have any close friends," and again, I would say, "Well, tell me about that." And try to get down to what is it that is really eating at them and driving these feelings or these emotions or reactions and behaviors. And then it may be, if it comes down to is, well, I drink a 6-pack of beer every day when I get off duty. Okay, now we're talking, maybe you have some professional counseling you need, and point them in that direction. Because I can't give you advice of what to do, or even half-ass guess at what is going on in your life if I don't ask you questions and have you share with me. Because there's four there's four fundamental things we all crave in our human existence, and that is safety, security, control, and prosperity. So if somebody is struggling in life, it's in one or more of those four categories. And you need to, dive into which one is it, or maybe it's more than one.
I love it. So that was Pat Welsh, retired police officer, trainer, and a man proving that strength and humility aren't opposites. They're the same damn fight. Pat, for folks who want to go deeper, where can they find your work or connect with you if they want?
Easiest place is the Warrior Servant Leader podcast.com. Everything I do flows through there. My calendar for consultations is on there, and some books I've written, all those kinds of things. At the Warrior Servant Leader podcast.com.
Copy that. And before we close, what's the one thing you want people to remember from today's conversation?
That you're not alone, and we're here to always support you in doing the right thing at the right time, the right way, and for the right reasons.
That's some solid advice. I love it, and that's a hell of a note to end on. Let me go ahead and hit end.
If you think it's too heavy to say it anyway. It beats a eulogy. You don't have to apologize for surviving however you can. You're not the reason things are heavy, you're the reason they're still moving. Need support right now? Text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. You're not alone, not in this job, not in this fight. Want to share your story or connect? Visit critical-run.com or message the Facebook page Dispatched and Dysfunctional. We're building this for you, for them, for all of us.